Have you ever sat quietly and wondered when everything started to change between you and your children? Maybe it was during a phone call that ended too quickly. Maybe it was when your birthday slipped by with only a text message. Or maybe it was the day you realized you were holding back tears while folding laundry in silence because you just didn't know how to say what you felt anymore. It's strange, isn't it? How someone you once cradled in your arms, fed with your own hands, watched grow from crawling to running, somehow becomes a stranger. Not intentionally, not cruelly, but distance grows where closeness once lived. And one day, you look around your quiet home and ask yourself, do they still love me the way I love them? That question, spoken or not, lives in many hearts as we grow older. It echoes in the quiet afternoons. It lingers in hospital waiting rooms. It creeps into the moments when we laugh at old memories, but realize those memories no longer seem to mean as much to them as they do to us. There's a special kind of ache that comes with feeling invisible to those we once would have given our lives for. And when that ache builds over the years, we begin to twist ourselves into knots, hoping, sometimes begging for attention, for gratitude, for a little piece of their time. We shrink ourselves so they won't feel guilty. We soften our words so they won't feel burdened. We give and give our energy, our patience, our resources because deep down, we hope they'll see and maybe they'll return. But here's the quiet truth. My dear friend, when we give love with expectation, we plant seeds not of peace, but of pain. I remember a woman named Lily, 72, soft-spoken, kind to a fault. Her 2 grown sons lived in different cities, busy with their lives, their careers, their children. She never asked for anything, always said she was fine, but she would cook elaborate meals when they visited, keep their childhood rooms just the way they left them. She mailed handwritten birthday cards to her grandchildren, bought thoughtful gifts, and ended every phone call with, "I love you," even when the response was hurried. But deep down, Lily felt forgotten. She waited by the phone every weekend, hoping they'd call. She dressed up to run into neighbors just so she could say, "My boys are doing well." Her heart bruised each time they forgot a special day, each time they canceled plans. One day, she confided to me with tears in her eyes, "I just don't understand. I gave them everything. Why does it feel like I don't matter anymore?" And it broke something in me to hear that, because I knew she wasn't alone. There are thousands, maybe millions of mothers and fathers like Lily carrying silent grief, feeling as though they're drifting into the background of their children's lives, like old wallpaper. But here's where our story turns. It's not too late to reclaim your heart. Not by forcing their attention, not by demanding their love, but by redirecting your own. The moment we stop expecting love to come from others, especially from our children, is the moment we begin to make space for a different kind of love, a deeper, more grounded love that begins from within. You see, there's nothing wrong with wanting love from your children. It's natural, it's human. But when that want turns into need, into emotional dependency, it robs you of your dignity. It starts to twist love into a transaction. And love, real love, doesn't bloom in expectation. It blooms in freedom. Take Madeline, for example, a retired school teacher, widowed for almost a decade. She used to spend her days scrolling through family group chats, waiting for her daughter to reply to her long messages. When she didn't get responses, she'd send more gentle nudges wrapped in emojis and updates. She felt like if she didn't remind them she was there, they might forget. But something changed in Madeline the day she overheard her daughter say on a call, "Mom's just being clingy again." It stung. It stunned her, and it shook her awake. That night, Madeline made a quiet vow. She stopped sending messages every day. She stopped waiting on her children to fill the silence. Instead, she began to fill her own days with painting, with gardening, with visiting the local cafe, and striking up new friendships. She signed up for a Tai Chi class. She started volunteering on Thursdays. The next time her daughter called, she was surprised. "Wow, you've been busy," she said. Madeline smiled and replied, "Yes, I've been doing things that bring me peace." And just like that, the tone changed. Because when you begin to treat your own time, your own heart, as sacred, not as an afterthought, you stop chasing the affection of others. And when you stop chasing, something magical happens. People start turning toward you, not because you pulled on their sleeves, but because your light has become steady again. I know this might be hard to hear. I know some of you have spent decades giving, sacrificing, being the glue of your families. To even imagine not expecting love from your children might feel cold, unnatural, even wrong. But ask yourself this: how long can you carry the weight of unspoken hurt without it breaking you? How long can you hold your breath, waiting for someone else to value your presence? There's a kind of power, quiet, beautiful power that comes when you stop waiting and start choosing to see yourself, choosing to matter to yourself, choosing to fill the empty spaces not with longing, but with your own presence. The heart doesn't become less worthy as it ages. If anything, it becomes more precious. It holds the stories, the sacrifices, the wisdom of years, and it deserves more than to be dependent on the crumbs of others' attention. You were never meant to fade. You were meant to bloom again, even in this season, maybe especially in this season. And that begins when you say, gently but firmly, I will not expect love as a repayment. I will give love freely and give myself love first. Because the truth is, love from others is a gift, but love from within, that's the foundation. And you, my dear friend, deserve a life that rests on a foundation that will never crack no matter who calls or doesn't call. Sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing what needs to change. It's feeling brave enough to take the first step. For so long, your identity may have been wrapped around your role as a parent. And when that role begins to shrink, when your grown children don't need you in the ways they once did, it can feel like you're standing on shaky ground. Who are you, if not the caretaker, the fixer, the one who holds everything together? But here's something we forget. You were someone long before they needed you, and you are still someone just as whole, just as worthy, even if they no longer ask for your help or seek your advice. The shift doesn't happen overnight. It begins in small, almost invisible ways, like recognizing that every time you put your own needs last, a little piece of you fades, or noticing how often you say yes when your heart is quietly whispering no. Take Henry, for example, a soft-spoken man in his late 60s who used to rearrange his entire week just to be available in case his daughter called. She rarely did, but on the off chance that she needed something, he wanted to be ready. He canceled dinner plans, skipped fishing trips, even avoided travel, and yet, months would pass with barely a word from her. He didn't complain. He just waited, until one day, his old friend Lucas invited him on a weekend getaway. Henry almost said no, reflexively. What if she calls while I'm away? He thought. Then, he caught himself. What if I stop putting my life on pause for a call that may never come? That was the moment it began to change for Henry. Not in bitterness, but in quiet resolve. He went on that trip. He laughed more that weekend than he had in years. And when he returned, his daughter had left a message, mildly surprised he hadn't picked up. It was a small moment, but it mattered, because Henry had chosen his life. For once, he had chosen not to wait. So many of us have spent years dancing around the needs of others, trying not to be a burden, trying to keep the peace, trying to earn love. But love that has to be earned like a paycheck will never feel safe. It will always leave you doubting. What if, instead of over-explaining, over-apologizing, or over-accommodating, you started standing quietly in your truth? There's a quiet strength in saying, no, I won't be available that day. Or, I understand you're busy, but I'm important too. Not with anger, not with guilt, but with the same steady respect you've always shown others, now finally shown to yourself. Abigail, a retired nurse, once told me how she used to cook Sunday dinner every week for her 3 adult children and their families. Rain or shine, she'd spend hours preparing meals, setting the table, waiting. At first, they came regularly. Then, one by one, the excuses started. We've got soccer this weekend. We're just too tired after a long week. Maybe next time. And still, she cooked, she set the table, she waited. One day, after a particularly long silence, she decided not to cook. Instead, she went to the park, alone, took a book, watched the ducks, ate a sandwich under a tree. When her daughter called that evening, asking about dinner, Abigail simply said, I took myself out today. It was peaceful. There was a pause on the other end, then something unexpected. Maybe we could come next Sunday and bring something. Would you like that? Respect is rarely born out of sacrifice. It's born out of self-respect. When you treat yourself as someone worth showing up for, others start to follow suit. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence speaks it now. That doesn't mean your children will always understand. They might feel confused at first. Even resistant? They're used to a version of you that always said yes, always made space, always came last. And when that changes even gently, they may push back. But that's okay. Growth often looks like discomfort before it becomes clarity. You're not being cruel. You're being honest. You're not shutting them out. You're simply coming home to yourself. And in doing so, you're modeling something powerful not just for them, but for yourself. You're saying, I matter. You're saying, I am more than what I give to others. You're saying, I can still learn, grow, and stand tall no matter my age. When you stop tiptoeing around other people's comfort, you make space for your own. Nathan, a grandfather in his 70s, used to say yes to babysitting. Even when he was exhausted, he adored his grandkids, but he also carried arthritis in his knees and high blood pressure. Yet each time his daughter asked, he agreed, afraid to seem selfish. Until one evening, he sat in his armchair, knees aching, and whispered to himself, I don't think I can do this again tomorrow. And the next time she asked, he told the truth. I love spending time with them, but my body's asking me to rest. Could we plan for next week instead? His daughter was surprised, but she understood. And more importantly, so did Nathan. He realized that love doesn't mean giving beyond your capacity. Sometimes, love means drawing a gentle boundary, especially with those closest to us. As you grow older, you begin to see that peace isn't found in being everything to everyone. It's found in being true to yourself. You begin to realize that the world doesn't end if you put yourself first sometimes. The sky doesn't fall if you say, I'm tired, or I'd rather not, or even, I'm choosing joy today, and that means staying home. And what's beautiful is this. When you start making these choices not with resentment, but with calm confidence, your presence changes. You begin to walk a little straighter, speak a little more clearly, smile a little more sincerely, and people feel it. They may not say it outright, but they notice. They feel the shift in you, the steadiness, the dignity, and slowly, their treatment of you begins to shift too. Not always in big dramatic ways, but in how they look at you, in how they speak to you, in how they remember that you, too, have a life that deserves care. And even if they don't change, even if the calls don't come more often, or the visits remain sparse, you are no longer holding your breath for their love, because you've already begun to breathe deeply in your own. There's something quietly powerful about the moment you stop trying to prove your worth to others. It doesn't always come with fanfare or a bold announcement. Sometimes it arrives in a whisper on a morning when you pour your coffee slower or choose to put on music you love. Not because anyone else is listening, but because you finally are. When you begin living for yourself again, not in defiance, but in grace, something inside you begins to exhale. You might notice it when you stop anticipating disappointment from your children and start planning your own joy instead. You might feel it the first time you turn off your phone during dinner, without guilt, or when you book a weekend retreat, take a class. Start journaling not to fill the hours, but to fill your spirit. It's not about doing grand things. It's about becoming deeply present with yourself again. Madeline, remember her, the woman who stopped sending daily texts and started living her own life. Something interesting happened after a few months. Her daughter, who had once barely replied, began to reach out more, not out of obligation, but curiosity. Hey, Mom, I saw your garden pictures online. It looks amazing. I didn't know you were into photography. Madeline smiled. I didn't either, she replied. That's the magic of returning to yourself. You begin to rediscover parts of you that were buried under years of tending to others. And people, especially your children, start to notice, not because you demand their attention, but because your light becomes too steady to ignore. They may not even be able to name what's changed, but they'll feel it. They'll feel that you're no longer waiting at the door, watching the clock, bending backward to make them comfortable. You're rooted now, in your truth, in your value. Owen, a widower in his early 70s, told me something that stayed with me. He said, I stopped asking if my children respected me. I started asking if I respected me. He had spent years trying to keep the peace between his sons, often at the cost of his own well-being. He didn't want to seem difficult, so he swallowed his preferences. He hosted holidays he didn't enjoy, kept silent about remarks that hurt him, tolerated behaviors that left him drained. But when he began to gently step back from what didn't nourish him, when he stopped showing up to every gathering out of obligation and began choosing the ones that felt meaningful, he started to feel something shift. The gatherings became warmer, more intentional, less chaotic. He wasn't doing more, he was doing less, but with more clarity. Because when we stop pouring ourselves into broken cups, we start holding our own with both hands. It's not rejection, it's redirection. When you no longer expect your children to validate your presence, you begin to show up for yourself in ways that bring peace. And ironically, beautifully, that's when they often begin to circle back. Not because you chased them, but because they begin to remember your strength, your center, your quiet dignity. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to demand to be seen. You only need to stand firmly in your light. Nathan, who once feared saying no to babysitting, noticed that as he set gentle boundaries, his daughter actually started showing more appreciation. She began to ask him how he was doing before diving into her needs. She even started making time for coffee together, just father and daughter. Not because he guilted her into it, but because his presence had shifted. He wasn't leaning in with desperation anymore. He was grounded, and in that groundedness, she found something worth leaning toward. This isn't about manipulation. It's not a strategy to get them back. It's about returning to a version of yourself that doesn't beg for belonging, but creates it from within. Sometimes the greatest love you'll ever give your children is not through sacrifice, but through example. Let them see what it looks like to grow older with grace. Let them witness what self-respect looks like. Let them learn through you that love doesn't mean self-erasure. It means presence, balance, wholeness. And here's something else. Your life is not behind you. No matter how many birthdays have passed, how many roles you've played, how many times your heart has been overlooked, there is still so much more to live, to feel, to enjoy. You are not a leftover. You are not what remains when everyone else has moved on. You are a soul with chapters still unwritten, and some of the most meaningful ones may begin now, when you no longer spend your days waiting to be invited into someone else's life, but instead, walk with steady steps into your own. I once met a woman named Claire who, at 76, enrolled in an art class for the first time in her life. She had always wanted to paint, but never gave herself permission. There were always diapers to change, meals to cook, bills to manage, holidays to host. Then one day, she picked up a brush, not because anyone told her to, not for praise, not for show, just because her spirit said, now, she painted every week, quietly, joyfully. Her children didn't understand at first. They said things like, "That's cute, Mom," or "You're really doing this art thing." But then, they started asking about her classes. One even asked for a piece to hang in their home, not because she chased their approval, but because they began to admire the woman who had claimed her joy. It's never too late to return to the things that make you feel alive. You don't have to abandon your children. You don't have to become cold or distant. But you also don't have to be small to stay connected. True connection doesn't require shrinking. It thrives in truth. So if your children see you and respect you more as you begin to stand taller, that's beautiful. But if they don't, you will still have yourself. And that's everything. Because the goal was never to be loved in exchange for disappearing. The goal is to be loved while fully visible, fully human, fully whole. And that begins the moment you stop looking outward for worth and start looking inward with tenderness. You've lived long enough to know what matters. Now is the time to live like you believe it. If you're still here, still listening, still breathing with me through these words, thank you. Truly, I don't take that lightly. Because if you're watching this, I imagine your heart has felt a kind of weariness that's hard to put into words. The kind that doesn't come from noise, but from silence, from waiting, from wondering if love, real love, will ever feel easy again between you and your children. And yet, here you are, still showing up, still open to healing, still hoping for something deeper, not from them necessarily, but from within yourself. That takes courage, and it tells me something about you. It tells me that even through the disappointments, the loneliness, the unspoken griefs, your spirit is still alive. Maybe tired, maybe quieter than it used to be, but alive and willing. That's where change begins. Not in the children who may or may not understand, not in the past that cannot be rewritten, but in you, in the now. Sometimes we believe it's too late to shift things, that relationships are set, that respect, if not already given, is lost forever. But the truth is, relationships are not cement. They're soil, and they're always growing, for better or worse, depending on what we continue to water, and what you've chosen to water lately through listening, reflecting. Honoring your own worth is something sacred. Maybe you're not ready to say it out loud yet, but let me say it for you. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to stop pretending you're okay when you're not. You are allowed to stop chasing people who only see you when you bend. You are allowed to choose peace over performance. You are allowed to let go. And maybe most importantly, you are allowed to love yourself out loud, even if no one claps. You've earned more than just survival in this chapter of your life. You've earned freedom, and I mean that in the deepest sense, the freedom to be exactly who you are, without apology or fear that it'll cost you someone else's approval. If your adult children are willing to meet you in that place, that's a gift. But if not, you still get to be whole, because your wholeness was never supposed to come from anyone else. Now I want to ask something of you, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Would you be willing to share your story? Have you found yourself pulled between love and disappointment in your relationship with your children? Have there been moments where you realized you were disappearing inside your own home? Or maybe you've already started walking this path of reclaiming your voice, your joy, your quiet strength. If so, what helped you begin? Your story matters, even if no one has asked, even if no one has listened. I want to hear it. And so do others who are sitting alone right now, wondering if they're the only ones who feel this way. Because you're not alone. Truly, there are thousands of mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, who carry these silent heartbreaks in their chest, like forgotten letters. So, if you feel safe, share in the comments, even just a sentence, something you wish you could say aloud, something you wish someone had told you years ago. This space was made for you, and if this message made you feel seen, if it opened something gentle in you, I would love for us to stay connected. Not because I want to build a channel, but because I believe in building something far more meaningful. Community. Presence, a place where we grow together, no matter our age. So, if you feel drawn, click subscribe, not for me, but for you, so we can keep walking this road side by side, quietly, bravely, steadily. I want you to know this as we end today. There is no shame in having longed for more love than you received. There is no weakness in having wanted to be needed. But there is great power in choosing, now, to need yourself most of all. And as you grow older, may you remember this. You are not growing smaller. You are growing clearer. You are not being forgotten. You are being refined. And you do not need their love to be whole. You only need your own. Thank you for being here. Truly, I see you. I honor your journey. Until next time, keep choosing yourself. Always.